Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, whilst people are just logging in, we'll get, we'll start off today. Okay, so today's piece kind of moves into a very kind of practical realm of Kabbalah. And as each session progresses, we'll begin to see how what the topics and ideas that we're talking about move further and further into this realm of how Kabbalah manifests itself in our world today. And we're looking today at this kind of idea of the true nature of beauty. I've called it the 10 Sefirot, the true nature of beauty. Very, very quick recap from last time. And we looked at this kind of I've just cut out here, the top aspect, the top section of the 10 Sefirot, the Keter, the crown, which is this kind of awe-inspiring aura that surrounds us, that gives us the inspiration to go on and to think. And we think according to Kabbalah with, well, depending on who you follow, I'm focusing on two different faculties, two different types of intelligences, Chokhmah, which is wisdom, and Binah, which is insight. There are some interpretations of the 10 Sefirot, of these 10 aspects, that includes a third aspect called Da'at, which I've put over here, instead of Keter. I don't want to get too, I mean, you could look into it if you're interested. I don't want to get too bogged down into it because it can get quite technical and confusing or whatever. But as I mentioned, the Hasidic movement of Chabad or Lubavitch base their entire movement on Chokhmah, Binah, and Da'at. That the abbreviation of these three words, Chet, Bet, Daled, spell Chabad. Here's where the name Chabad comes from: Chokhmah, Binah, and Da'at. And it's all to do with the realm of the intellect, the idea of us being able to think and to navigate this world that we live in using all of our mental faculties. Chokhmah being this kind of inspired wisdom, right, that pops into our subconscious. Binah is what we do with that inspired wisdom. And then Da'at, that is to do with fixed knowledge, the aspects that we learn and we digest from the world around us. And there's something interesting I wanted to kind of point out here, that when we're studying now, we are trying to kind of see God. We're trying to see spirituality in a differentiated way, right? Looking at divinity in different aspects, because we only have finite comprehension. We like to, many of us, all of us may probably, like to organize our lives, organize the way that we think into set topics, into set subjects. And Kabbalists understood this, and is why they kind of boiled down God to a certain extent and us to a certain extent in these 2 and 10 different ways. However, when it comes to Jewish worship, and it's like, when it comes to Jewish worship, when we pray, we turn our attention to God as an absolute, as an encompassing of all of these aspects, not just necessarily one particular piece. And a person's plans and thoughts are visible only as manifested in one's activities, so too those very subtle divine processes visible only within the context of the events that befall us. Meaning this. Actually, let's cut out there. Let me fix that for you. Hold on a second, that's the wrong thing. Sorry, you're seeing here we go, Natural World History as a Torah. Brilliant, I don't know why it was cut off. Let's go back over here. Still cut off, doesn't really matter. That we only necessarily see each of these aspects, right, Chokhmah and Binah, when we look backwards. That if we were to look back at a decision that we've made or a thought process that we've had, when we look back at it, we can then maybe kind of pinpoint, right, that was that kind of subconscious kick that I had in the back of my mind that then allowed me to create this piece, or that allowed me to say that comment, or go on to create this. But only really looking backwards. It's very, very difficult and a huge challenge for us to kind of look at it the other way, to try and train ourselves and to control the chokhmah, and to control our binah, and to tap into, right, the keter, the crown, the aura, the inspiration. But perhaps today we'll have an insight into how that can be done. And we're going to now kind of move down the diagram of the 10 Sefirot. Let me see, do I include the entire diagram just so we can look at it again? I'm sorry, I keep on going backwards and forwards. This is not great. And this is a different thing. I don't want this. Let's close that. You're looking at behind the scenes. Do I have a different one? I don't, do I? Okay, I'm going to open up so we can see the entire diagram. I opened up last week's session. So that way we can see the entire thing. So then last week we looked at this idea of, here we go, the intellect, right? The intellect, these top three. We're now going to move down a rung and look at the next three, din, chesed, and tiferet, or chesed, gvura, and tiferet. When we move from planning, when we move from thinking, we move from our mental faculties into practicalities, into how we go about and cause change within the world, how we can then use our God-given inspiration for good. And we're going to start off with chesed. Okay, chesed that finds itself underneath, right, the right-hand side, underneath chokhmah, wisdom, just pure inspiration. And chesed, for us, a lot of these terms we may be familiar with. Again, you can take a look here at some of the other connections that one makes with it, but in a very kind of very basic understanding on kindness. Kindness, according to Kabbalah, according to Judaism, is an act that has no cause. There's no reason for, let's say, an individual to go and give to someone else, other than it's just the right thing to do. It is kind. Similarly, right, the creation of the world, as interpreted by Kabbalah, was an act of kindness, an act parallel to creation, an act of ex nihilo, Latin from absolute nothingness. Tohu vavohu, the world was created, but so too we have the ability to create and to give and to do actions from absolute nothingness, other than it's just the right thing to do. And there's something extra there, which Kabbalah speaks multiple occasions, which is this idea of chesed shel emet. I need to change this of chesed shel emet, of the absolute highest level of kindness or true kindness, is one that is performed for someone who has just passed away. That again, if anyone in their lifetime has had to be involved in any kind of the Jewish process of mourning, of burying the dead, maybe you'll have an insight into kind of the different acts and customs that go into it. But one, you should know that the vast majority of all mourning practices are heavily influenced by Kabbalistic teachings. And the way that Kabbalah visualizes the soul and visualizes the person who, the vessel that carries that soul. Because it's according to Judaism, it's the closest thing we can get to a selfless good deed. If anyone's seen the Friends episode with Joey and Phoebe arguing as to there being no selfless good act, and to which Phoebe allows herself to get stung by a bee so the bee can show off to its bee friends, and she didn't get anything from it. Judaism's version of that is any mitzvah related to the dead, because the dead are unable to kind of say thank you, to give us thanks. And that's why, and that kind of imbounds and explains to us and gives us an insight into what chesed is all about, this idea of pure love. And when we kind of see it, right, we're talking about links, right, between the different aspects of the 10 Sefirot. If we link chesed to chokhmah, right, chokhmah plants here on the right-hand side and chesed falls right underneath. The chokhmah is that spark of inspiration. We don't know the source of that inspiration necessarily. Chesed also similarly is like chokhmah manifest. There's no reason necessarily for us to go and be kind to someone other than, right, it's just as a part of our nature. There's no necessarily any logic to it. And we're going to come back to this soon. There's the biblical character who's connected, who kind of embodies and imbues the concept of chesed, is Abraham, is Avraham. And it's that first stage of thought into action. That Avraham, according to Jewish theology, was the first monotheist, was the first person to believe in God. But he didn't just sit there and believe in God, similar maybe perhaps to other biblical characters who preceded him. He went on to do kindness, to be a good person. Now on the opposite side, the balancing, and we'll look at yin yang, because these two kind of are, you would say, Judaism's version of that, is gvura, or it's also known as din. So if you've seen it could be known as din, justice, or gvura, strength or severity. And they both, this is positioned on the opposite end of the 10 Sfirot to Chesed, and is perceived as this kind of idea of justice, of severity, of pure, of justice. An example would be here, right? This is found in the Talmud in Chagiga. Let there be a firmament, the world kept stretching, expanding until God said, enough, and it came to a standstill. That God is the one who is in control of the world, and when God says stop, that means stop. There is order to the universe. And it's the antithesis, one could say, to the concept of chesed, right? Where chesed is about an individual going out and doing good just because, right? Just because. Gvura is the opposite. Din is the opposite. Everything needs to have a reason. Everything needs to have a logic. To give like another silly example, if anyone's into musicals, right? Les Mis. I always like to compare Chesed and Gvura to the two main characters of Les Miserables, to Jean Valjean, who in essence is a character who embodies the concept of kindness, of doing something because it's just the right thing to do, to steal bread, to feed his family, or to give up his life so someone else can live, versus Javert, this sheriff police character who can only see right and wrong, who can only see justice, who only sees the world in black and white. If you do something wrong, you deserve to be punished. No room for mercy whatsoever. And there's other, if we look at the words themselves, gever. Okay, gever in Hebrew is another word for strength. In Israeli slang, it's another word for like kind of being like manly or whatever, like macho. And there's this kind of balance that's going on. And we require both of these attributes in order for the world to exist. And I'm going to give you another example. Okay, I'm going to talk about the names of the angels created by God. So within Jewish teaching, there are various different angels that were created. There are 12 different types of angels, but also angels as characters that appeared at various different points within the biblical text, but also, according to Jewish teachings, kind of interact within the world. And angels, according to Kabbalah, are like spiritual robots. They were created by God to serve a certain purpose, but they themselves have no free will. And each angel has its own purpose. And I'm going to mention the names of 5 different angels and the way that they are placed within the world. Okay, and they kind of, it maps kind of slightly similar to the 10 Sfirot. The most famous angel, the most famous angel in kind of all, I would say in the religious world, I want to venture a guess, the most famous angel name. Anyone know? Most famous angel that appears.
I'm not sure. Is it Michael? No, I don't know.
So what did we say, Victoria?
I'm not really sure, but is it Michael by any chance?
Okay, so Michael is in there. We're going to talk about Michael. I mean, he could be that's not the one I was thinking of. Not that what I was thinking of was necessarily correct. But Michael, right, we're going to get to Michael in a minute. Michael is one of the angels we're going to speak about. The one I was thinking of, anyone else? Another famous angel?
Is it Satan?
Gabriel?
Okay, great. Okay, the two. So wait, first of all, wait, I can see your face. Wait, who said Gabriel?
Me, Sophie.
Sophie, okay, excellent. So I was thinking of Gabriel, and someone else just mentioned Satan. I'm going to get to Satan. Who said Satan?
I said Satan.
Who's I? Wait, sorry, I can't.
Mara.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so Satan we're going to get to. I'm not sure if we'll get to this time. Satan also in Jewish, in Kabbalah, Satan is also an angel. Unlike Christianity, it's not a fallen angel. It's still an angel of God that has a very specific purpose to challenge human beings, but in a way that's kind of in control and ordained by God, not detached from God. The angel I was thinking of when it comes to Satan, not in this time, but next time, the angel I was thinking of was Gabriel. The only reason I was thinking of Gabriel is because Gabriel, before we get to kind of Jewish literature, Gabriel is the angel, the number one, appears to Mary, according to the New Testament, before and it reveals that she's going to have a baby, and that baby is going to be the Son of God. Also, it's the angel that appears to Muhammad as well in the Quran. So it's pretty, the Gabriel gets around. He gets around all the different religions. That's why I thought it was the most famous. Anyway, Angel Gabriel, Gavriel, okay, Gavriel, the strength of God. Now there's a prayer, okay, there's a Kabbalistic prayer that individuals say before they go to sleep at night that asks for protection from 5 different angels. And it goes like this, okay? And it kind of it speaks about where each angel needs to be placed. And the first goes like this. So it starts off B'Shem Hashem Elokei Yisrael B'Mini Michael. On our right hand side, we have the angel, as Vicky said, Michael. Okay, Michael. On our right hand side, we have Michael. That on our right hand side, and we mentioned last time that when we look at the 10 Sfirot and we look at Kabbalah, the right is mentioned as being connected to power and strength, that we are naturally strong on our right hand side. And sometimes when we ourselves are naturally strong, we can forget where our strength comes from. So God places on our right hand side the angel Michael, which means in Hebrew, Michael, who is like God. Meaning, reminding us that before you kind of get ahead of yourself and think that everything that you've earned, everything that you have achieved is purely from you, remember that everything comes, Michael, it comes from God. And then the prayer continues, Umismoli, and on my left-hand side, Gavriel. I have the angel Gabriel. But on my left-hand side, signifying perhaps kindness and to some extent being weaker, we have Gavriel. We have an angel that imbues strength. We have an angel that imbues justice. Because when sometimes maybe when I'm feeling downtrodden or I feel like overwhelmed, then God gives me an angel that allows me to be strengthened. And then Umil Fanai Uriel. In front of me, I have the angel Uriel, which means the light of God, or right, Uriel, or El, the light of God. But when I'm traversing, I'm moving through the world, I need clarity, I need light in order to see where I am going. Okay, which could be, which connects to the Chokhmah, the Keter, and the Binah, right? The idea of the way that we perceive the world in front of us. And then Me'achorai, Raphael. And behind me, I have the angel Raphael. Raphael, also it's pretty famous, which means literally Refuah, Rofeh, like doctor, or Rofeh, to heal, healing of God. There are instances that there are events that take place that I didn't know they were ever going to come. I didn't know they were going to happen. So God places behind me an angel, Raphael, a healer, a healing angel to take care of me. Right? And we could definitely perceive and see how in this day and age of how our lives have been turned upside down by something that we didn't necessarily see coming, and how the Raphael, the idea of us wanting to find some kind of healing, both in a physical sense and also in an emotional sense, is very much something which is important to us right now. So we have there the four. We have Michael on the right-hand side. We have a reminder that before you get carried away with your own strength, with your own prowess, remember that that God exists and that everything comes from God. On the left, Mismoli, Gabriel, we have Gabriel to remind us that when you're feeling downtrodden, when you're feeling like there's no hope, that God will give you strength through the angel Gabriel. We have in front of us Uriel, that we have a light that gives us guidance and perspective when we're moving forward. But sometimes when things come up behind us, Raphael, the angel Raphael, comes to look after us. And it connects very much to the way that the 10 Sfirot are placed. Right? If I go back to my screen where I have all of them, let me open that up again. I shouldn't have closed it, to be honest. That was a mistake. If I look at the 10 Sfirot, again, they're placed intentionally on to counteract perhaps our animal urges, our natural kind of instincts to say otherwise. So on the right-hand side is chesed. On the right-hand side, where maybe I would be more harsh, is balanced out with kindness, right? Acting for no other reason than to be good. And on the left-hand side, where maybe I would be more meek, I would be more timid, comes din, comes judgment, or we've been calling it gvura, strength, to give me that extra oomph to go out and be a better person, and to go out and to bring justice and fairness into the world. So if I come back here, there's this other aspect as well that we kind of see of gvura as self-restraint. That for those of you who have studied Judaism before, you will know that it's not just that there's this balance, right? There's positive commandments and negative commandments. In fact, there are 365 negative commandments, 248 positive commandments, right, doing commandments. They equal a total of 613. The Kabbalah says there are the 248 positive and the 368 negative correlate to the sinews and to the limbs that make up a human body. And there's a balance there of both positive and negative that continuously flow together. That with another interesting piece, right? The 365 days of the year, the 365 of those being negative, the majority of our time, unfortunately or fortunately, is us just not necessarily doing what we want to do. The gvura, this idea of strength, is self-restraint. That for us to navigate this world, according to Kabbalah, and then be better people, initially we have to learn what not to do. Right? What is off limits before we can then enter the pool, the canvas of the world, and begin to create. And there's an example here, another very famous piece of Talmud, famous because it was quoted in one of the first seasons of The Simpsons, Sotah 47, where a person should always draw people closer by means of his right hand and push them aside with his left. That there is an instinct, right? There is an instinct sometimes, and again, we've got to kind of just accept in terms of right and left and how we perceive those, or how the Talmud and Kabbalah perceive those. There is an instinct that with our strength, we want to maybe sometimes push people away, to use our strength as a form of restraint, to make boundaries for ourselves. And Kabbalists come along and teaches us that you should do the opposite. But with the tool that you would usually use to push people away, you should bring people closer. And with the tool that you would usually bring people closer, you should maybe kind of push them away. And again, it's painting this picture, right, of a constant balance of maybe sometimes not always doing what naturally comes to us. The stronger and more dominant feature of human interaction should be the drawing closer and making friendships with other people. Another really good example is the prayers that we say on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Avinu Malkeinu. A very famous series of prayers that we say, in which we beseech God, again, to save us and to look after us and provide for us. And we use this very strange term of Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu meaning Av, Abba, our father, and Malkeinu meaning our king, our parent and our monarch. And it comes to kind of also show this balance, this yin yang of, on the one hand, right, we see within the world people that we admire and that we love. And at the same time, we also have relationships that are not necessarily based in the same form of love, but more based in fear or seeing someone AWE, fearing someone out of just kind of reverence. And Judaism, in this regard, in this respect, is constantly playing this balancing game between chesed and gvura, going out there and being this kind of giving and kind and friendly and smiley person and wanting to do good constantly, versus the idea of showing some form of restraint and knowing when to find that balance. It's also exemplified by the two different characteristics of Abraham and Isaac. Abraham being the characteristic of chesed, of kindness, and Isaac being that of gvura. If you look at the two characters and their story arcs within the Bible, Abraham is a doer. He goes out and he bargains with God, and he completes 10 tests that are given to him. He goes out and he goes to teach people forms of morality. Isaac, comparatively, does very, very little, absolutely nothing. The only two kind of missions that he have are to retread his father's steps. But in that way, he's also a sign of gvura, of restraint, of not going overboard, of not doing too much, of knowing where your limits are in order to kind of to achieve. I'm going to go back a second, and I'm going to ask a couple of questions to hear from you. But these two aspects, chesed and gvura, are the closest thing that Judaism has in terms of like the balancing out of a physical universe, or how one should see oneself. Another way of looking at the duality of man, the duality of ourselves, of a constant battle between these two pieces of ego versus humility, right? Of giving tzedakah and saving for yourself, of going out into the world and looking after those, of being a kiddush Hashem, of being a light unto the nations, and just kind of looking after what one would say in the Talmud, daled amot, your own concern. And again, we find again and again and again in every aspect of Jewish practice. Right? Whenever we talk about jewels, when we talk about twos, they kind of manifest themselves everywhere. We look at, for example, Shabbat, of Zachor and Shamor, of remembering Shabbat and keeping Shabbat. Right? Remembering Shabbat is those positive aspects of making Kiddush, of having meals, of resting, of enjoying Shabbat, and Shamor, keeping Shabbat. Those are the negatives of the restraint that's required in order to create an atmosphere of peace. You can see it in so many different aspects of chesed and gevura. One more piece, and then I'll take maybe some questions before we kind of continue on, which is another beautiful piece from Pirkei Avot of who is strong, someone who sublimates his own passions, someone who restrains themselves. Within Judaism, for millennia, strength has never been about going out and performing some kind of rite of passage of, going out and bringing in like the hunt of the day, right? It's been about working on your own issues, becoming a better version of yourself. That's strength, right? That's what it means to conquer the challenges that we have within ourselves. Before I continue, any kind of thoughts, observations, questions as it relates to chesed, of kindness, and gvura, and strength or judgment? Any thoughts, questions before we continue? So what we'll see now is, look, these two pieces come together. And they come together to create tiferet. Tiferet literally means beauty. Let's go again. I'll come back to my piece here. Tiferet is this like linchpin of every aspect that we find in the 10 sfirot. But chesed and gvura, kindness and judgment, or kindness and strength, when placed together, equal tiferet, equal beauty. I'm going to give you, this is another Kabbalistic piece called the Sifri. It's a commentary on the Torah, specifically the fifth book of Moses. And it uses the following example to explain like the coming together of chesed and the coming together of gevurah. That a man who brought 2 ships, tied them to anchors and iron weights, staged them in the middle of the sea and built a palace upon them. As long as the 2 ships are tied to each other, the palace stands firm. Once the ships are separated, the palace cannot stand. Thus is also with Israel. When they do what God wants them to, he builds his upper chambers in heaven. When they do not do his will, as it were, he builds his vault on earth. Similarly, it says in Exodus, "This is my God and I will glorify him. When I acknowledge him, he is glorious. When I do not acknowledge him, he is, as it were, not glorious. I will proclaim the name of God, ascribe greatness unto our God. When I proclaim his name, he is great. When I do not, he is not great." Another example from Isaiah. "So you are my witness, declares the Lord, and I am God. When you are my witness, I am God. But when you are not my witness, I am, as it were, not God." So here in this piece, it's talking about the relationship between the Jewish people and God, as manifested in chesed and gvura, and what tiferet is all about. The idea that our relationship as a Jewish people with God is connected between this balance, this constant going backwards and forwards between kindness and between gvura. But you could also see it with us as individuals. Right, there are many occasions that we find ourselves not knowing which path to follow. Whether or not we want to treat someone with, for want of a better word, the severity they deserve, to go in on someone because they have wronged you, or to take the high road, as it were, and to show them a kind of a higher level of kindness. Or perhaps it could be within our own lives when we look at ourselves, right? The way that we view ourselves, that now we could either like look at ourselves in a kinder light, particularly the challenges that each and every one of us had to overcome. Like you look at examples right on social media of, it can be very easy to judge oneself harshly with how one has coped or not coped, achieved, not achieved. How good has your bread baking actually got over quarantine? How many musical instruments now have you learned? You've been locked up at home doing absolutely nothing, versus the idea of being kind to oneself and giving a moment of, for no other reason, just to allow yourself to breathe, to forgive yourself, right? But the discussion, the coming together of those two pieces equals this concept of tiferet, equals this concept of beauty. And it's interesting that the word beauty or tiferet is used, because chesed, as I've been saying, is the innate ideology of goodness, and gevura is almost the opposite. Okay, gevura sees kind of giving as, for no other reason, is almost poisonous to society. We could also see it within political movements, right? It's easy to see how within maybe our own countries or around the world, how different political movements sometimes will favor one form of interaction over the other, right? The idea of just giving for the sake of giving, or pursuing a fair and just society that rewards and punishes based on one's actions, and that's it. And that on the one hand, let's say a governmental policy of gevurah would see pure chesed as poisonous, as negative. Tiferet, right, is the synthesis of both those approaches. And it manifests itself in many, many different ways, on the individual level, on the community level, on the political level, on the spiritual level. And we look at, when we talk about what is beauty, when we talk about that we find someone else beautiful, we don't look, I mean, depends on how you use language, but like when you really know someone and love someone and see their beauty, it's the integration of every single thing that makes them them. That the coming together of not just like contrasting characteristics, but rather it's integrating every single aspect of a person to create the individual that they are. Right, that if we look at, let's say, black and white being opposite, it's not mixing them together and making gray, it's mixing them, it's having every single color, every single hue, every single hue encapsulated within black and white. Another example here from the book of Kings, I saw God sitting on his throne and all the heavenly hosts are standing at his right and at his left. That when we perceive spirituality in Judaism, we try and perceive God. God is not, as we've been saying many, many times, not one thing, but there are aspects of God that are both concepts of gevurah, of justice, of fairness, and also of mercy, of kindness. And then when you bring those two together, when you bring those two aspects together, then you get to a concept perhaps of mercy. And here, what does right and left mean? The answer is that those who defend the accused are said to stand at the right, and those who are persecuting the accused are said to stand to the left. That every single moment within our lives, we are always in this constant turmoil, this constant battle between chesed and gvurah, of being accused, but also being defended. And that constant battle, that constant swirling is tiferet, is beauty. And then when we talk about this, like when we talk about meditation, for example, and different meditative forms within Kabbalah, so we've spoken perhaps briefly about kind of connecting to the keter, to the aura that is outside of ourselves. There is also another approach, right, when you're focusing on your breathing, when you begin to kind of actualize and visualize first, visualize and then actualize this inner struggle, but the inner struggle is in itself a form of beauty. And here I've just put together like the three, right? And again, I'll send this to you to read in your own time, so you have like everything to go over. I don't want to kind of read everything, but this is the actualization. This is Judaism on a practical level defined, right? And then we speak about Rabbi Akiva, okay? Actually, not Rabbi Akiva. We'll talk about, there's a few. Okay, we'll talk about Hillel. Okay, Hillel who said that the entire Torah is to not do unto others what you want done to yourself. The rest is commentary. In a similar vein, every aspect, every notion within Judaism, within Kabbalah, is found here. Without these, you have nothing, right? Everything kind of dissipates. Everything disappears. Again, looking at the 10 sfirot here, you take out these three linchpins, nothing then is held together. You could still have a functioning, meaningful, spiritual, religious existence with these three. It might not necessarily be Kabbalistic, it might not be fully spiritual, it might not be fully physically fulfilling, but you have everything that you need. And what I mean by that is, right, if you look over here, when we're looking, it's love, discipline, and balance. That's how I can, and the best way of summarizing it. The chesed as love. It's the most powerful, necessary component of life. Without loving kindness, without the willingness to give to someone else and not expect anything in return, right? We spoke about chesed be'emet, of giving, like true giving. Without that, nothing exists. And the highest way we can connect to God is through chesed, is through love. Sometimes it's not enough, sometimes it's too difficult, sometimes we can't get to a place where we can connect to God through ahava, through love. But it's vital, right? To give us the enthusiasm and the energy to be able to want to be better versions of ourselves. The next, right? So if next is love, so first is love, then, but also discipline. Judaism has always been, and will always be, a religion of self-discipline. That every point, every aspect of Jewish law is focusing on how we can rein in the love that we want to give, and then articulate it in the most appropriate way. It gives us direction, right? Focuses us like a laser beam. It kind of allows us to pinpoint moments that maybe are false, or to cut off areas of our life that maybe are bringing us down. But ultimately, it allows us to control all of our inclinations, to control sometimes the negative thoughts that we may have, right? That if an individual is pure love, pure benevolence, and to some extent, right, according to Judaism, that leads to chaos. We find in the Torah, there are various names for God, but the two most common names for God in the Torah are Yud He Vav He, which we pronounce as Adonai, and Elohim. Adonai and Elohim. They are the two most common names. There are other names that appear. I mentioned last time, Ehyeh, Asher, Ehyeh. But generally speaking, 90% of the time is Adonai and Elohim. Adonai, if you ever to randomly pick up a Tanakh and it were to see when Yud He Vav He was used, Adonai, it's generally within the context, the narrative that's taking place, within the concept of chesed, within the concept of love. Whenever the name of God Elohim is mentioned, it's within the context of justice or discipline or strength or restraint, right? When God is either punishing someone or judging someone, that's generally when that name is being used. And it's the coming together, the use of both of those names, of those characteristics, which kind of follows through every single story that appears within the Tanakh. The best place to see it kind of in action is in the story of Bereshit in Genesis, where we begin as the world being created purely as a form of justice, that it has to exist. And then only after the sin of Adam and Eve, of Adam and Chava, does this Yud He Vav He name get introduced, because of the need for kindness. That in actuality, God could have said, well, what's the point? I've created these human beings and they've been there 5 minutes and they've already made a mistake. Why did I even create human life in the first place? And then this extra characteristic comes on and says, well, there needs to be a place for love. And that harmony, right? That harmony is Tiferet, is beauty. We see it everywhere in our life, right? That when the coming together of opposites, or the coming together of sometimes paradoxical concepts, and then creating something bigger, greater than the sum of its parts, is beauty personified. The idea of by integrating love and discipline, you're creating, according to Kabbalah, truth, emet. And this is something about, again, this is something which, again, just for the Hebrew alphabet. Hold on a second, where else am I see your faces? Where are you? I'm going to stop sharing the screen. For the Hebrew alphabet, we're talking about emet. Okay? Emet is made up of the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the middle letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Aleph, Mem, the middle letter, and Tav is the last letter. Emet is all-encompassing. Emet is everything. It's the synthesis of all of these ideas. It's the synthesis not only of love, of ahava, and of kvura. It's everything. And it gives you, by bringing together, right, by balancing discipline with love, you then are able to have a clear and objective picture of your needs and other people's needs. Right, by introducing truth, by suspending personal prejudices, allows you to express your feelings in the healthiest way. And so when we kind of talk about, right, how Judaism, right, classical Jewish practice is informed by Kabbalistic teachings, this is it. Right? Every single mitzvah, every single aspect of the Torah is underpinned, is framed by chesed, gvura, and tiferet. Kindness, strength, and beauty, or kindness, strength, and truth. And so if someone comes along and someone tells you that, like, I'm Jewish, or I keep mitzvah, I'm into this, but I'm not into Kabbalah, ultimately, like, that's completely false. By mere fact of, by keeping any Jewish perspective, any Jewish mitzvah, you are manifesting bringing into the world this Kabbalistic concept. Questions, thoughts, concerns, observations as it relates to anything that we've discussed, anything like that? Let me give you another Hebrew thing. Anyone know what's the Hebrew word for a lie?
Sheker.
Sheker. So I said, so emet is truth. Aleph, mem, tav. Aleph first letter, mem middle letter, tav. Sheker, it's not the final letters, but it's the shin, kuf, reish are the second last letter, third last letter, and fourth last letter. The Gemara in Shabbat talks about, like, these two words and why they are created the way that they are. Sheker is narrow vision defined, right? You're only focusing on one particular certain point and using that to extrapolate and to then come to a certain type of conclusion. That's a lie, right? It has its foundations maybe in truth, it has its foundations in reality. You're focusing on one particular aspect, right? It's the news article, news video that kind of discounts all other evidence and focuses on one piece. That is sheker, shin, kuf, reish, when you place everything right in that small pocket of corner. Well, that small corner. Gemara asks why not tough, right? Why not have it the last letter, second last letter, and third last letter? Because tough, right, the final letter, that already is like part of this, like, all expanse. Right? If we're pinning emet on truth from the beginning to the end and everything in the middle, sheker is like digging its way where nothing else has ever been mentioned. That's like a cute little thing of emet and sheker. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns, anything like that?
I would like to ask, is any act of kindness viewed as beautiful? Because let's say like a person would know about this, like this act, like people are trying to have a balanced life and maybe like act kindly, but if we are doing this knowing that we have to like balance it, that's why we do it, like is it still viewed as an act of like kindness and beauty in this like?
Okay, so excellent. Let me just correct me if I misinterpreted your question. Look, I think that's the issue with chesed in general, right? That it's very, very difficult to find an act which is completely, in Hebrew, lishma. Lishma, like just doing it for the pure purpose of it being good. And so that's why there's the example I gave there was chesed shel emet, of any kind of act that like would revolve or be involved with the deceased, because it's according to Jewish teachings the closest thing to a selfless deed. One would also maybe talk about anything with regard to like children, for example. That like my baby doesn't necessarily give me instant gratitude or say thank you when I change her diaper. Like it's gross, but I do it because I love my daughter. And right, you could say like down the line, like there's your building a connection there, and down the line, whatever. And I think there is like the aspect of like what is your intention? And I don't think, I suppose, as a positive, I think that having your intention to bring balance to your life, and by extension balance to your community or balance to the universe, by doing a good deed isn't the worst intention to have, because ultimately we're always going to have some kind of benefit. We're always going to get some kind of feeling of satisfaction by doing something good. So if it's going to be by bringing balance, by bringing order to my life, then I think that's the worst way to go.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Okay. Yofi. Okay, awesome. Chelsea, have any other question?
May I ask a question?
Yeah. Yeah, Yona, yes.
Hey, how does the idea of like eye for eye, tooth for tooth fit within the the Kabbalistic vision of the Torah?
Okay, amazing question. Okay. So there's two different answers, and I have to go. There's two different answers. So number one, it's even on like a Kabbalistic level, it's never regarded as something which is, first of all, practical. It's never in all subsequent Jewish teachings, whether it's within the Gemara in Masechet Bava Kama, or whether it comes later on in the Zohar. Eye for an eye is never mentioned as practical, meaning that if you damage someone's eye, your eye then has to be damaged. But there are two different approaches. Okay, in like a practical approach, which we find in the Talmud, it's one has to calculate the value of that eye of the individual, and then the person who caused the damage then has to give that individual the right amount of money. On a Kabbalistic level, it's similar-ish to what one would regard to as karma, right? Eye to an eye, as Kabbalah interprets it, is essentially karma. That when you go out into the universe and do something bad, you've then created some kind of imbalance, and that imbalance will then kind of have ramifications somewhere else. Now, different to traditional interpretation of karma, that negativity might not necessarily come back to you as an individual, or let's say if we're talking about on a national level, the Jewish people, but there'll be some kind of negative ramification. And that also has also you've got positive too. When you go out and do a positive deed, that also has positive ramifications, and they're constantly weighed up and equalized. And that's how so eye for an eye there on a Kabbalistic level is like is kind of becomes this Jewish version of karma. Does that answer your question?
Cheers to that again.
Chelsea.
I didn't have a question. I just had a thought. It was
Okay.
interesting for me, this lesson, because when they asked if we have a question about Kabbalah, and I think my question was, how does it relate outside of religion to us spiritually? And I think that these three, it's ironic for me because you said that they relate more to Judaism than any other three that we're going to talk about, but yet I personally have such a connection to them outside of religion. Whereas, like, for instance, today I was with a friend, we're arguing about something which is like based on judgment and you know, the right side of this, and really, like, I messaged her before this class being like, we need to find a way to be kinder to each other and have this kindness, and that really centers in truth and beauty. So like the way it comes full circle in real life as well as religion and in the Kabbalah is kind of beautiful, and I took a lot from this lesson, so I just wanted to share.
There's literally no words I could say now that's going to like top anything you've just said, Chelsea. So I'm just going to end the session there with that just unbelievably moving thoughts and observation that Chelsea had. I mean, I know that I just said something and therefore that has now taken away. I do apologize for that, but thank you, Chelsea. That was really beautiful. So beautiful. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, amazing. Thank you all so very, very much. Have a wonderful week. And I look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thank
you,
you.
Charlotte.
Bye too. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.